Welcome back to the third and final segment on ethics. As we begin this segment, I want to talk about the word integrity. Usually when we talk about integrity, we talk about being honest and doing the right thing. And absolutely that is integrity. But integrity also means so much more. Integrity also is about a quality of or state of being complete. It's about being whole. We have an ethical obligation to demonstrate integrity with our intervention. That means not just being honest in our data collection and not lying to our clients, but also being whole and complete while we're there. That means showing up and giving 100%. It means following the plan as it was written. It means doing everything we can for our clients to get the best outcomes for them. As the BCBA defines integrity in Section 1 of their ethical code, it says that integrity is in fact being truthful and honest and arrange the environment to promote truthful and honest behavior in others. In fact, this is one of the reasons that we stray away from punishment and stick to reinforcement. Punishment has been proven to have a negative side effect of lying and avoiding punishment contingencies when they're present, where we want to be able to promote optimism, reinforcement, and a positive outlook for our services. It means to not implement contingencies that would cause others to engage in fraudulent, illegal, or unethical conduct. This is a responsibility that you have not only to your clients, but us as an agency and to your coworkers. Having integrity means never having anybody fill out paperwork for you. It also means never filling out paperwork for services that you did not do. It means filling out paperwork and your time card in an ethical and honest manner. The third part talks about follow through with obligations and professional commitments with high quality work. This means not just showing up, but showing up and doing 100% each time. It also talks about conforming to legal and ethical codes in our profession. This means following best practices. It means following completely the plan as written. And it means sticking and adhering to all of the IDAPA regulations that we have also. And finally, integrity is defined by the BCBA is taking steps to resolve ethical conflicts in a responsible manner and in accordance with law. This is where you need to let us know if something is wrong. If something doesn't feel right, tell us. If you see something that isn't right, let us know, make sure we fix it. Attached below is our grievance procedure. It has the contact information for each of your clinical supervisors and my personal office and cell phone number on it. Call me if you see something's wrong. Let us fix it. The next term I want to talk about is fraud. CMS, or Medicaid, defines fraud as an intentional deception or misrepresentation made by a person with the knowledge that the deception could result in some unauthorized benefit to himself or some other person. Fraud is billing for more services than you provided. It's doing services that weren't authorized. It's any time that yourself, your client, or us would benefit in a way that came from deception. We would never ask you to do that. If you ever see any fraud, we ask that you report it to your supervisor immediately. Next, I want to discuss some other considerations that we have or some other ethical dilemmas that we may run into as part of our job. The first one is, what is the risk of doing something versus the risk of doing nothing? An example of this may be that you see a child engaging in self-injurious behavior. As we mentioned earlier, we never want to be physically forceful to a child or physically restrain them, but what if they were hitting their head on this brick? You would obviously want to physically intervene because the risk of doing nothing would be too great. And we see that a lot, like what else could be the risk of if I don't intervene here versus if I do intervene? Another consideration we have is what is active treatment? We so often see a client that is dysregulated or isn't ready to engage in aggressive intervention right then. What are we going to do? How long is it okay to take a break? When a client is having a bad day, is it okay to kind of tone down our intervention a little bit that day? What are we going to do ethically to follow the plan, meet our guidelines, and still do what's right for that child? We also want to look at what are we reinforcing? What is the behavior that's being maintained through our reinforcement, through our present? And what are we doing to make sure that our client is not becoming dependent on us? We want to look at How do we be most therapeutic, but also least restrictive? It's a balance that's going to be changing each day and perhaps with each activity with our clients. We also may want to look at how do we manage a parent's needs and expectations versus what's written on the plan. We have an ethical obligation to make sure that our behavior intervention plans are always effective. We need to make sure first, when our client has reached their targets, that we move on to the next goal or the next phase of that goal. We also need to make sure that if the treatment is not working, we need to be making changes to that plan. We have an obligation to be working with our clinical supervisors to be able to get those plans changed so that they can be most effective for each of our clients. Another ethical obligation we have is as mandatory reporters. As we're working with vulnerable children, we need to make sure we're doing everything in our power to keep them safe. Below are the guidelines of mandatory reporting that all of our employees must follow. If you ever suspect any abuse, neglect, or exploitation, we ask that you make sure it is reported. Our agency policy is if it's an emergency, you report it immediately. Call 911 and report it. If not, we ask that you fill out an incident report and immediately report it to your supervisor. At that point, your supervisor and one of the directors will call Child Protection Services or another appropriate government agency or entity. We ask that you do not conduct an investigation yourself or do any further questioning. We want to make sure we leave that to the officials. You also have an ethical obligation to report any violations that you see here at the workplace. If you see anything that isn't correct, report it immediately to your supervisor. Part of the requirements of working for us and being an eligible employee is passing a background check. If you're ever arrested, you need to call our human resources and notify them immediately. What about other ethical violations? In order to work in this field, you had to pass a background check. If you're ever arrested or under investigation, we need you to notify our Human Resources Department immediately to make sure that you're still cleared to work for us. And again, as a reminder, if you ever see anything that isn't ethical or appropriate, make sure you're reporting it immediately to your supervisor. We're frequently asked, how do I know if it's ethical? What if I'm not sure? When in doubt, ask. Through our services, we're able to go on family vacations with our kids when appropriate. We're able to go to the water slide park, ride go-karts, do lots of fun and great activities when we have the right permissions, when it's the right time, and when we're billing for the right service. If you're ever not sure about an activity and if it's appropriate to do, just ask your supervisor. We just need to make sure we have the right permissions in place, it's the right time, and that we're billing for the right service. But we need to make sure we're always conforming to our regulatory and ethical guidelines. So in conclusion, you can see that ethics are everywhere. But ultimately, ethics is about that concept we talked about earlier of integrity. It's about completeness. It's about wholeness. It's about following those guidelines with fidelity. It's about making sure we're following all of the regulations and doing what's right for our clients. And again, if you're unsure about a certain activity, please go check with your supervisor.